Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webcast, Transforming Accounts Payable to Deliver Strategic Business Insight. We're very excited to have everyone on board today, and we appreciate your taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. My name is Anne-Marie Cochia, Director of Marketing at Canon Business Process Services, and I'll be your moderator for today's webcast. Before we get started, I have a few quick housekeeping notes. To eliminate background noise, all participants have been muted. You will only be able to hear our presenters speak. If you'd like to ask us a question, which we do encourage you to do, you may do so at any time by clicking the chat button on the WebEx dashboard on the right side of your screen. Type your question, click send, and we'll try to address your question before the end of the program. Because we only have a limited time, we apologize in advance if we are unable to address your question online, but we will be sure to follow up on any unanswered questions after the program. Lastly, we will be sharing an archived version of today's session with all of you after the webcast is complete. So today, the agenda for today will be setting the stage on the current state of accounts payable. We'll then discuss some key concepts. We'll move on to the accounts payable transformation process, and we'll give you a view into the new reality. Before we get started, I do want to take just a moment to give you an overview of who Canon Business Process Services is for those folks that are not familiar with us. We are a business unit of Canon USA. Our services include business process outsourcing, such as accounts payable services, processes such as student financial aid, claims processing, and other paper-intensive workflows. We manage document back-office processing, such as imaging, records, and mail. We provide records management services to help companies with their information governance program. We are also a corporate campus logistics provider for facilities management and logistics services for large corporate campuses. We do office support services and have an e-discovery and litigation support business. You'll see on the slide here we provide on-site, off-site, and offshore processing centers that act as an extension of your business, and we offer a wide range of services tailored to your needs. And finally, over the last 9 years, we've been recognized as one of the top 100 global outsourcing providers in the outsourcing industry by the International Association of Outsourcing Professionals. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed panelists for today. Kathy Bozar has over 20 years of experience in operational accounting and finance, organizational change management, and consulting. She has a great deal of experience driving business process efficiency and organizational transformation. Here at Canon, Kathy creates customized solutions that combine people, process, and technology to enable clients to achieve their vision for accounts payable. Kathy, we're so glad to have you on board today, and we thank you for carving out this time to share your expertise.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Thanks for joining us, everyone. As Anne-Marie mentioned, we're going to start out by setting the stage. One of the concepts that I want everybody to think about right now is about the fact that perception is reality. In most cases, we end up our presentations by asking questions and having a Q&A session. And I'm going to change that up a little bit today and ask all of you to think about these questions up front. What is accounts payable, and what does an accounts payable department do? So I'll just give you a few minutes to collect your thoughts, and then we'll share with you what the most common responses are from a technical perspective. So just a definition of accounts payable in your mind. Okay, so let's take a look at the next slide and see how the ideas that you're thinking about compare with those that we've heard consistently throughout other companies in my days of consulting. And the first one is actually a Webster dictionary definition. Of course, accounts payable in and of itself is a liability to a creditor. It's your accounting definition. Many people define it as a cost center in a company or an organization. What does an AP department do? Well, pay bills, it keeps data into an AP system, they cut checks for us, and they answer calls from vendors. So those are some common responses to those questions. I want you to keep those in mind as we move through the presentation today, because we're going to revisit these questions at the end. The next question is really, I'd like to actually get your feedback from each of you, and this is our first poll question. How is accounts payable as a function and an organization perceived by others within your organization? The options that we provide are clerical, administrative, overhead, back office, or cost center. An organization that's negative gets blamed for errors a lot, late payments, things of that sort. Maybe you do see it as a profit center, and any other characteristics that you might find in your organization. So if you'll just take a moment and answer that question, we appreciate it.
Yes, we'd like to hear from our audience today, and we have a large group, so we'll just take a few seconds here and record your responses. So Kathy, what we're seeing is 30% are saying clerical, 26% are saying overhead back office, and 9% are saying negative, blame for errors. What do you think about that?
I'm not surprised, because that tells us that well over 50%, more in the 60% range, have a perception in their organization where the accounts payable department is just that. It's an administrative function. It's something that you have to have, and the organization is not seeing the value. And that lends itself very well. That's why we're here today, is to talk about how we can change the organization and change the perception of the AP organization in your company. Okay. Let's just talk about a little here. Is this your reality? So this, again, is right in line with what we just heard in the answers to that poll question. When accounts payable is perceived as a have-to-have, accounts payable is also perceived as a group who is just to do what it's told. So as you can see in this little cartoon, it's meant to be funny, but I know I've had experiences where this was my reality. If an invoice is due in 30 days, we pay in 60. If it's due in 60, we pay in 90. If it's due in 90, they probably don't need the money anyway. Sometimes a laughing matter, other times not really, because if many of you are in accounts payable organizations today, you know that things like this actually do happen. We're going to shift that reality. And how are we going to do that? Well, shifting the perception of the role of accounts payable is really important. Today, organizations are challenged with process inefficiencies, clearly a lack of visibility, especially into the invoice processing life cycle, and paper-based processes burden the department. Again, based on the poll information, it sounds like there's a lot of administrative perception, and perhaps that is your reality. Therefore, there would be a lot of paper-based and manual effort. So today we're going to talk about how we can make that shift. So if we're in that administrative perception / reality, work is manual. There's a lot of data entry. It's a very tactical function within the organization and constitutes a lot of repetitive and inefficient work. Some may view it as being archaic. We want to transition, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of transition, transformation, and what that means in just a few moments. We want to transition to become a collaborative organization and eventually a strategic organization. What are the characteristics of a collaborative organization? A collaborative organization would have automation as one of their tools to help them in the collaboration as well as in the processing. We provide visibility in that invoice processing life cycle that might be missing in that administrative function. It's a supportive organization, supports the entire enterprise. It's not just a group of individuals who is pushing paper and paying bills. There's knowledge sharing, there's data to be shared. It's definitely more efficient. And what I'm highlighting here, you can see the folks in the organization. So thinking about the people are no longer AP clerks, they're AP analysts. So keep that in mind because there is a shift in skill set that can be required as well. Once you become collaborative, and by no means you have to be collaborative and then step into strategic. This is an evolution, but your goal is to be seen as a strategic partner. So that includes being a collaborative partner. It includes intelligence and analytics. Key is to be performance-driven, and that's in technology, in process, and in your people. Many times we just focus on the process and the technology. Your people need to be performance-driven as well. When you're strategic, you're viewed as a strategic partner with your procure-to-pay counterpart. You can provide data and analytics that can really help them understand their spend, and that in turn can help with improved negotiations and vendor relationships. You can help your Treasury Department, you can provide insight into procurement, and you can provide your finance organization with working capital optimization. We're going to talk a little bit more. You see business process efficiency and transformation in here. I'm going to highlight the difference between those two in a few moments. What's important to note here is that both are important as you're transforming your accounts payable department. So let's jump into some of these key concepts, including the difference between business process efficiency and transformation. I'm also going to speak about accounts payable maturity model and steps to accounts payable efficiency and transformation. What I want to highlight to you is see your vision, begin your transformation, and keep in mind that it is a process. It's not a discrete event. Transformation is a process. It doesn't happen in a day. It happens over time. So be kind to yourself in recognizing that, but have that vision in front of you so that you know what you're striving for. So let's talk a little about the difference between business process efficiency versus transformation. Business process efficiency primarily is achieved by streamlining the core processes of your organization. So, of course, this takes into account automation, process optimization, and your responses to both your internal and external customers. What's highlighted when we talk about these business process efficiency is really talking about cost. So cost in time, cost in resources, cost in dollars. While you're doing that, of course, you want to maintain high quality. The difference between business process efficiency in and of itself and transformation is that transformation adds value beyond the cost savings. This is where you add value as a partner, where I talked about being that strategic partner with other key stakeholders in your organization, such as procurement or treasury or your finance area. So transformation, the most important takeaway from this is that it goes beyond cost savings. It doesn't mean the cost savings aren't important. It's just that there are benefits that go beyond dollars that are also important. So this is the accounts payable automation maturity model. This is a model that I've developed over time to kind of highlight the various stages that an organization might be in. So some people might cross into different stages. They might have a little paper-based and be a little bit image-enabled. Again, with most things, it doesn't mean that you have to be one before you move into the next. These are just categories to give you a general direction of where you may fall. So the 5 categories are to be paper-based, image-enabled, workflow-driven, efficient, or optimized. Paper-based, pretty clear, entirely paper-based system for invoice receipt, manual indexing, storing in file cabinets, a very manually intensive process. Image-enabled, you may do a little front-end or back-end imaging either for content management purposes or to just have people have visibility into the documents themselves. Moving into the workflow-driven, this can include auto-indexing, your extraction of data from your invoices that are scanned, as well as workflow for approvals and exception handling as well. That's when you become really efficient. Once you start taking the matching into consideration, using EDI and electronic invoicing, and ensuring that you're using that workflow to drive your routing and your reporting. When you're fully optimized, you become paper-free, touch-free. Usually this involves things like vendor portals, PO flips, things of that nature. So that really becomes your most efficient, most optimized situation.
And that takes...
Go ahead, Anne-Marie.
Okay, that takes us to our second poll question. Again, we would like to hear very much from our audience. The second question we have for you is, where does your organization's AP function fall within the AP maturity model? Is it level 1, paper-based, level 2, image-enabled, level 3, workflow-driven, 4, efficient, 5, optimized? Please take a moment and let us hear from you. Record your responses on the right, and we'll wait a few seconds and have the group give us their input. We're still getting some, so we'll just wait a second or two more. We thank you for your participation. Let's see. Okay, well, what we're seeing here right now is 12% are in level 1, 23% are in level 2, image-enabled, and 35% are in workflow-driven. So, Kathy, are you surprised?
No, again, not surprised. I expect that as the industry is moving more toward and technology is available, that more people are driving toward at least using the technology to capture images and perhaps do some data extraction and OCR work. Where folks have been stopping short is to be that efficient organization that's really driving and using that data to do PO matching, to route it for approval, to use the data and the analytics, and even moving into vendor portals and getting electronically received, the electronic receipt of invoices. So this is rather consistent with what we're seeing in the industry today, and demonstrates the need to continue the transformation process. I'm happy to see that folks have moved out of being completely paper-based and that there is some image enablement and the introduction of workflow. So that puts companies in a good position to continue to transform their AP organization. So the third concept that I want to introduce, in addition to the business process efficiency versus transformation and the maturity model, are what we're calling steps to accounts payable optimization. So manual processing, you can see where this is consistent with being an administrative function, as well as where you might fall in the maturity model, if it's paper-based or perhaps just paper-based actually at this point. And take a little look here at what the optimization is. You're at 0%. There's manual invoice entry, a manual approval process. Everything is manual, and you have no visibility into where anything is. The next step or stage that one can move into to advance brings great benefit. So once you centralize and digitize, so if you think about that maturity model again, if you just take a step into the maturity model, into the image enablement, you're now 50% optimized just by taking that single step. By moving into optimizing your labor and using more automation and workflow, you can increase to 80% optimization. And then finally, with continuous improvement, shifting into that maturity model of optimized, where you're about 99% optimized. We never want to say we're at 100%. There's always room for improvement. I also want to highlight a couple of other metrics that are important here. When you're doing manual processing, we're being generous. I've seen companies who have over 50 or 60 days left to process in their cycle time. You can move from over 30 days to 5 days or 5 days or less if you're fully optimized, and that's really important. And the other metric to keep in mind is your cost per invoice. Being able to drive that from over $30 per invoice to about $5 to $10 or less is really an important metric to consider. So what we're going to talk about now is the transformation process. So I introduced 3 concepts to you, and now we're going to tie them all together. So in the first, you can see where, as an administrative function, you fall into the maturity model of being paper-based and image-enabled and what that means. You can see from the items on the right, the manual process, our steps to process optimization. Take that next step in going into centralized and digitized. Even though you're optimized by 50% and you cut your days and your cycle time from over 30 to perhaps 15 days, you're still really part of an administrative function. The rest of the work that you're doing still really has a lot of manual effort around it, exception handling, approvals, et cetera. So in here, you still have minimal automation, limited reporting and analytics, limited visibility, long cycle times, of course, higher costs. Your staff itself is focused on processing and vendor inquiry. So you can see where at this stage, not really in a position to provide that added value that we want to strive toward. So how do we take steps to become a collaborative team? Well, you want to become workflow driven and you want to become more efficient. Well, how can we do that? If we look at our steps to performance optimization in the upper right, we can see that if we centralize and digitize a little bit more than what we're doing today, if we start introducing workflow into that process and queuing our data into appropriate workflows for operations and for processing, as well as introducing workflow for approvals and exception handling, we can really start to free up some of the time that our staff was using to do data entry and things of that sort and use that to become more collaborative. Start looking at business process efficiency. Start looking at your KPIs. Start looking at reporting and analytics where you can start to have conversations with your counterparts in other areas like procurement or finance. Be able to answer questions and provide insight as opposed to being the group that is putting out fires when the vendor isn't getting paid. In this area, as you make that transition from administrative to collaborative, it's really important, and I can't stress this enough, you have to take stock of your staff and the skill set. You're shifting a group that was typically working on back office work, doing data entry, taking vendor calls, and now you need to look at your staff and give them the training that they need in order to bring them to a level where they can provide that analytical insight, where they can actually start managing the exceptions rather than doing the data entry, looking for the root causes of why there's an exception, things of that sort. And finally, how do we become a strategic partner? Well, becoming a strategic partner is going to take a little bit more time, and there may be more investment required. To truly become an optimized function and have the manpower available to provide more analytics and have the tools available, we need to perhaps invest a little bit more. Have a vendor portal. This will provide self-service for your vendors to be able to ask questions regarding status of their payments. They can ask those questions themselves just by going into the portal, which would be available to them 24/7, and they can find out for themselves by doing that query where things stand. That takes the burden off of your accounts payable team. They no longer have to answer all those questions. They can be working on spend reporting, analytics, cash flow analysis, things that are really going to add benefit to the entire enterprise. Having things like a PO slip available in your vendor portal would also be important.
Kathy,
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. You know, I do have a write-in question, if you don't mind, if I could read it to you now.
Sure.
Have you seen successful transformations? How do you know the transformation is working?
Yes, I have seen successful transformations. Again, it's hard. The transformation to collaborative, I've seen that taking place more to get to that strategic partnership at this level that we have on the screen right now. does involve a little bit more investment, so sometimes organizations aren't quite willing to take that extra step right away. What I would say that you know is you start to notice that you're not hearing the complaints as much from outside of the organization. You're starting to have, you might still have the same communication, so you may still have people reaching out to you, but now they're reaching out to your organization and asking AP to provide them information. So instead of saying, what's the status of the vendor invoice, they're saying, can you tell me what my spend was for the month of June with vendor X? So you can see the difference in, you may still be getting the calls from procurement, but the type of call that you're receiving, you see a change in that. And that's when you can start to notice, that's one way that you can start to notice that you've been successful in changing your perception in the organization. The other is, you know, in your finance organization, again, people are coming to you and asking you questions to provide them with consultative information, fact-based information. And that's where I've seen people really recognizing and celebrating that they've seen that they've actually made the transformation. So let's talk a little bit about what that new reality would look like. Some key things that I want to reinforce and have all of you remember and take away today is that difference of business process improvement or business process efficiency and automation. It will result in cost savings, and it will be the first step in driving you to a collaborative AP function. But remember that that's only part of the process. True transformation goes beyond BPI or business process efficiency and cost savings. It's a journey. So again, keep in mind, it's not a discrete event, and that's something from a change management perspective you'll have to work with your leadership to communicate so that they have expectations that meet what you're trying to do. So their expectations shouldn't be as it is with, say, implementing an automation tool. You flip the switch and all of a sudden you're not running on system X, you're running on system Y, and there's a tangible date and time that something happens. Transformation happens over time, and the pace at which that transformation occurs is going to be dependent upon the investment that your organization is willing to make, the change management strategy that you put in place, and finally, the receptiveness to change and the pace at which your own culture receives change. So that kind of led into the third bullet. Make sure that you have a very good, well-planned, well-thought-out change management strategy and plan. This is about perception and the way people see you, so it's not just about the people, the technology and the process, it's about the people. It's really critical to continuously assess your AP staff, train or reallocate resources to make sure that the skills are aligned with the transformed function, keeping in mind that you now have a team that needs to be analytical and maybe getting questions from people at different levels of the organization, so their communication skills need to be accelerated as well. So when we opened up our dialogue today, we asked a few questions. What does Accounts Payable Department do? What is it? And how is it perceived by others in the organization? Well, what it is, we hope to shift. From a Webster's Dictionary perspective, it is what it is. AP's liability to creditor. But what does it do? Well, it's a potential profit center. It facilitates invoice exceptions. It conducts spend analytics. It drives cash flow management. That sounds a lot better than it's a back office function, they manually enter data. This really demonstrates value enterprise-wide. And how is it perceived in an organization? Well, to shift from being administrative, a cost center, or back office function, to being a collaborative strategic partner that's analytical and value-added is a much better perception and a much better reality. So we just want to mention a few ways that Canon can help with this transformation. This is, as you can see, pretty well aligned with the AP performance functions, performance steps that I highlighted earlier. Centralizing and digitizing by bringing that invoice receipt to a central location, scanning your documents, capturing data, doing pre-processing for coding and validation, and making sure that you have data integrity. By automating and optimizing your automating, and then of course having optimized your labor. So using workflow for approval, exception processing, exception analysis and resolution, both on-site and offshore, really driving to understand root cause so that it isn't just about the task, it's about how do you make the process better. Continuous improvement, vendor portals, mobile support, being able to support the P2P operation. All of these things, including dashboards and spend analytics, can drive you to be that strategic partner. Providing administrative and accounting support, and what I really want to focus on is some of the implementation and ongoing support, the training, the communication, the change management, and the organizational redesign. You can see where these are key areas that are going to be required as you transform your organization, because the people is going to be a huge piece of this. And how do we do this? Well, the steps to AP optimization that I shared with you earlier is really the approach that CBPS has to optimizing an organization when we partner with you. So by shifting from manual process to centralizing and digitizing your invoices, providing you with the technology people and the processes that are best in class to automate that workflow for your approvals, for your exception handling, and driving you to become that strategic partner in your organization.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and that concludes today's session. You know, we do have a little bit of time here, and we would very much like to hear any questions from the audience. So we will wait a few moments and see if we have a question or two from our attendees here. I see that I do have one that has come through. Kathy, how can I influence senior management to consider an AP improvement project?
That's a really great question, Anne-Marie. That's probably the biggest challenge that folks in an AP organization have, and that again goes back to the perception. So what I would recommend is that you develop your business case, because of course there's going to be potentially a financial investment required in order to introduce automation into your AP organization to gain the benefits of efficiency. So you're going to go through the standard business case of having your KPIs, the best that you can to demonstrate what you think your improvement can be, especially cost, and then drive your return on investment. What I would suggest that is most important to add is to add that section on those things that aren't quantifiable. So what are the benefits that you can bring to the organization and where you can help them in terms of partnership with your, specifically your procurement organization. The benefits that you can bring to Treasury and Finance are great, but the automation can do that to some extent. But what you really want to do is focus on how, as an organization, by becoming a strategic partner and having metrics and analytics and reporting available, you can help the organization in its procurement space. And typically, once you start demonstrating how you add value enterprise-wide, as opposed to just fixing what's perceived as a problem in your own organization, that's really when you start to get the ear of people and your key stakeholders outside of the AP organization.
Okay, well, thank you, Kathy. I'm not seeing any other questions here on the screen, and with that, thank you to our audience for joining us. We hope you found today's program helpful. If you do have any additional questions for Kathy or would like to learn more about how Canon Business Process Services is helping other companies do AP transitions, please go ahead and contact us directly at the email on your screen.